Okay.
So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This is our third week of the Coach Socialization series. And tonight we have Evan with us to talk about effective communication and leadership. So like I said, feel free to use the chat box with any questions, or you are unmuted if you do have any that you'd like to bring up vocally. And this will be posted on YouTube later if you want to come back and rewatch it or pass it on to other coaches or your athletes. So Evan, take it away.
Thanks, Kirsty. Good evening, both of you all. This webinar is being streamed live to the world from my semi-finished basement in downtown Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, not too far from the Hungry Hut Pizzeria or MacInnis Pizza. You pick your poison. So tonight we're going to talk about effective leadership and coaching, but when we boil this down, it's all about effective communication and understanding the types of approaches you can take based on your own skill set, your own comfort level, and your experience as a leader, as well as in communication. What this actually is a very trimmed down version of the National Coaching Certification Comp Dev, or Competition Development Module of Coaching and Leading Effectively, which is one of the sessions or one of the modules that I run. I know that everybody's muted, but if you have any questions at any point, just speak up and I will ask the odd question every once in a while, but I'll call you out by name so we don't have some dead air. So be on your toes. Okay. Kirsty, can I get a thumbs up if the agenda is moving along? All right, thanks. So this is the agenda for this evening, briefly. So we're going to look through a number of areas tonight that should help you with addressing what leadership challenge you may be facing now, or have faced in the past, or anticipate that you'll be facing in the future. I think when I had planned on doing this webinar, there wasn't a worldwide influenza spread that has essentially shut the world down and has definitely had a major impact on sport, which is sport is essentially grinded to a halt. So what your leadership challenge may be now is probably nothing what you thought your leadership challenge was even in February. So it's incredible how much this has impacted us all and how fast it's working. But so we can frame this as, you know, what are we currently facing as a challenge in today, or when we are back on the water, in the pool, on the field, in the court, what will that challenge likely be? I don't plan on having this go on for longer than 45 minutes, I would guess, but who knows once I get going. So before we get into this session, I'll just do a little brief introduction of myself for those of you. My name is Evan MacInnis. I work for the Canadian Sports Center Atlantic with Kirsty. I've been with the organization since 2007, and I started out in the New Brunswick office, originally from Glace Bay in Nova Scotia. Went to St. FX as well as UNB. Grew up playing rugby and soccer. Wasn't very good at either of those. Switched over to rowing in my early 20s. Also wasn't very good at that either, but still continue to row on a daily basis. Through my work, I work with coaches every day. Provincial coaches, national team coaches, club coaches, community coaches, in a variety of settings, on a variety of topics, but really I quite enjoy working with coaches and helping them in not so much the technical or tactical component, because that is very sport specific, but a lot of times in some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, and how to get messages across, how to boil down what the actual challenge is, and coming up with some troubleshooting ways of addressing it. I myself am I guess currently I picked up coaching again as a U3 soccer coach. It's more like not letting kids die, but so in that case it's pretty successful. No one died last year in my group of 55 under threes. In the past, I have coached a bit of rowing. I've coached soccer, under 12 soccer, and other than that, just helped out with other sports. As I mentioned before, I am a learning facilitator for competition development through the National Coaching Certification Program. And currently, I facilitate 7 modules. 6 of them are the 9 comp dev modules for anybody who's doing old level 3. And I also facilitate the making ethical decisions module. So, like I said before, this is a boiled down version of coaching and leading effectively. But I want to get an idea of who's in the room. So maybe if you could tell me, and I'll call you by name, your hometown or where you currently are coaching or living in, the sport that you coach, and what age group or what level you coach. The reason I want to do this is so I get a little better idea of who's in the room, and then hopefully my examples will be more pertinent to who is in the virtual room. So I'll start with Zoe.
Okay. Hi, I'm Zoe. I am from Nova Scotia and currently I'm living in Dartmouth. I coach swimming in Sackville, the Sackville Waves aquatic team. And the level of kids that I work with, well, I work with my whole team every day, but my specific kids are 13 to 18-ish, and they range from like high level provincial to senior national Olympic trials qualified.
Okay, great. Thanks, Zoe. And Jake?
Yeah, my hometown, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I work in the sport of canoe kayak. My day-to-day, I'm not working with a very wide range of athletes. Typically, I work with a 27-year-old pair athletes, but when I'm running camps and whatnot, I'm working with U14 up to U21.
Okay, great.
Right from provincial to national level.
Excellent. Kirsty, you want to play along too?
Sure, I'm here. Okay, my name's Kirsty. I'm from Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. I coach ringette, and I coach the Nova Scotia U19 AA team and a U9 rec team.
That's a big age group. Variance. Okay, thank you. So here's what I want you to do. Is on your own, just think about when you felt like you were the best as a leader in coaching or in somewhere in the world of sport. Maybe you also play a role as an administrator as well. But think of a specific situation where you feel like you were at your best as a leader. And I'll give you 1 or 2 minutes, but I just want you to write down on paper that's next to you or some software on your computer or phone, just a few words that would describe a feeling or a thought or the outcome or some of the emotions that were connected to when you felt like you were at your best. And the reason why I ask this is to get a brief idea on where you lean on when it comes to your leadership style. So I'll give you a minute to sort of reflect. I won't take that personally. That person that came in saw my face and took off. Okay. So hopefully you guys have had a few seconds to think about some of those words, and you don't need to get into deep thought on this. I just want something to sort of jog your memory on that. We could get into a lot more detail on this, but this is the time we have. So what I want to share with you is the leadership practices from Kouzes and Posner. And these are well-known, clearly defined types of leadership. So what you have is challenging the process, which is an opportunity to change status quo, looking for innovative ways of organizational improvement, etc. Inspire, share vision. So having that passion or belief in making a difference, envisioning the future, creating an image, enabling others to act. So giving someone else the keys to drive, modeling the way. So creating those standards of excellence and that lead by example. And the last one was encouraging the heart. So recognizing individual contributions, celebrating accomplishments, and making people feel like heroes. So looking at that, this is a brief snapshot with a very brief definition of the 5 leadership practices, which is shortened up. It's challenge, inspire, enable, model, and encourage. So looking at the few words that you wrote down a moment ago on when you were at your best, do you feel that that leadership practice, that you could categorize your experience in one of those 5 leadership models? And if anybody's willing to share, that would be great. If not, we can move on, but I will give a, in my own head, 10-second count.
I can share. I think the modeling the way has always kind of been one for me. In the one situation I thought of, it's always been kind of a point for me to lead by example. And with the demographic of kids I usually work with, which is, you know, generally 16 to 19, for when I was a full-time coach, modeling the way pretty much speaks pretty clearly to me of what I was trying to accomplish and how I approached the situation with just dealing with some adverse situations with poor race results and challenges and re-races, and we won't dive into that story, but it's yeah, that'd be mine.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Jake. Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
I can go too. The 3 words that I chose were authentic, clear and concise, and then excited. And I think that falls more into inspiring shared vision. And reading the description there, that's like pretty good with how I try and lead, but then also modeling the way in some extent.
Okay, that's good. I just realized that wasn't full screen. Does that look better now? Yeah, thanks for that thumbs up. Okay, thanks for sharing, guys. Really appreciate it. And also, don't feel like at any point you have to. I will just leave it open-ended there too. So just on this, we would get into much more detail, but again, what I would say is that some good extra reading around this would be, around leadership practice would be good. So understand that we need to have the abilities to address all of them. So you might lean towards model, or you might lean towards inspire, but you should get comfortable in all 5 models, even though one will be your bread and butter. Just think of it as having more tools in the toolkit. Because to be a successful coach, you need to be able to engage the athletes that you're coaching different ways. So, you know, just like there are different types of learners, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, reading, written, there are different modes to get the most out of your athletes, to get the most out of your assistant coaches, to get the most out of what we'll call stakeholders. So, and I'll give you an example of this. I had a coach who knew how to motivate everybody in their own way. So in the sport of rowing, sometimes you're out in not ideal conditions, and we complain and bellyache like there's white caps or it's pouring out or whatever. And a coach would say, It's okay. Not everybody can be a champion. And to me, that triggered enough to be like, I'm getting out in that boat right now because I know what you're doing here. You're mentally getting at exactly how you know that I'm going to get motivated to train. That didn't necessarily work for my partner, who was like, "Oh, sweet, so we can take the morning off." But there was different ways to engage both of us to make sure that he could get the most out of both of us at that time. One thing that I would also mention is it's right now, it's a big mistake in thinking that leadership is only based on position. And just because you are maybe an assistant coach or a coordinator or whatever the title may be, the non-captain athlete, that does not mean that you cannot be a leader. You can lead from anywhere in any position. So also, we probably all know some people in sport or in work, in our sport or where we work, that some people are leaders by title only. So just because someone has a title does not mean they're a great leader. And just because someone has a specific title doesn't mean that they are not a good leader. So leadership needs practice. Just like anything else, it's a skill. And the more you practice the skill, usually, the better you become at that skill. Usually within leadership, there is a change. You are looking to make a difference, and whether it's performance of athletes, performance of an organization, performance of your coaches, you're hoping to lead them into better, prosperous areas. Having a good relationship with, again, your stakeholders, which is athletes, parents of those athletes, co-coaches, administrators at your clubs, administrators at your association. It's paramount in good leadership to have good communication. And I can think of a number of coaches who are brilliant technically. Like they could break down a specific skill, a specific drill, a specific tactic so well. But they really struggled in leadership, which meant they really struggled in communication, which actually had a diminishing factor on the athlete performance. On the flip side, I've seen the opposite. I've seen some very poor technical coaches who just could inspire athletes so well that they got more out of those athletes than anybody with strong technical abilities. So it's a little bit of both. So if you have that technical prowess and you have great communication and good leadership skills, or what I would define on some of the stuff that I'm doing is great interpersonal and intrapersonal skills, that is what's going to make you a very successful coach. We can't rely just on our technical abilities or our tactical abilities. We have to be able to work on our other skills as well. So this is what I was mentioning before, is think about what a challenge is that you're facing, whether that's right now or something that's just been lingering in the background for a while. This could be a real challenge, as I said, in current times, or something that you know is waiting for you when sport gets back. There's many examples that you could think of. A gap between your current athlete's performance and their goals, heaven forbid a challenging parent, some fundraising challenges, your current training environment isn't ideal, you don't have access to athletes as much as you hoped you would, challenges with administration, whatever it may be. What I'd like you to do right now is write down what is that specific challenge. And I'm not going to ask you to share this. This is just something that you can keep to yourself and what that challenge is. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep coming back to this challenge throughout the rest of this webinar tonight. Go back to, as we discuss something or as I talk about a new area, reflect back on what can I do with this leadership challenge, with this information. Okay? So there's 4 areas that we're going to look at for the next few minutes. Working together, what that means, interventions, not like that TV show on A&E, but I'll get into what an intervention means. Listening effectively, which is really important, and delivering a clear message. And leadership just isn't about the frequency of the leadership practices. It's also about the skills, which is why I said before that if you practice it, you'll become a better leader. We also have to know what skill we're trying to develop as we practice it. So the first thing we'll look at is the stage of group development. And I bet you've all seen this before, and I'll get to the point very quickly about why this is important in context. So there are 5 stages of group development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Okay. And here's some fun little photos that I put together in about 90 seconds before this webinar happened. Is just a poor or a great example of each of those stages. So some of the stages are very easy to identify. We know what the group looks and feels like when they're forming. We know what the group looks and feels like when they're adjourning, usually because the season's over. Some of the other areas we might need to identify a little bit better. If anybody wants to take a shot at what some of the emotions may be, or some of the actions that you may see in a storming stage, or a norming stage, or a performing stage. And if not, I can provide those real quick. Okay, so in forming, like our bread, which everybody's cooking now because that's like one of the few things that you can't find at the grocery store is flour. In forming, usually we have this group, and this is usually at the start of the season or anytime a new team is introduced or a new mass of athletes. You'll get a little bit of anxiety. Athletes will be a little bit nervous. They'll be tentative. They'll be shy. Just sort of like figuring out who's who, what roles they're going to fall into, where they stack up within the group, etc. Within storming, you'll have a frustrated group, a resentful group, an upset group, which is, it's all part of bringing that group coming together, still figuring each other out, but maybe in a more outspoken way. Norming, which is our little wolf there, just being content. So if the group is training, they're content, they're confident, they're sort of going through the motions. Performing, they're excited, they're enthusiastic. Your athletes are showing up. They're into the warm-up. They're into all the components of the coaching that you're doing. They're learning from each other. They're really pushing each other in a very positive environment. Adjourning, you might have some anxiety and some sadness. Like, I think about what's happening right now. There were some athletes whose maybe their final national championship was just cut short. And it was sort of that, there's like some sadness and some anxiety into that's how the season ended. And at the same time, in different circumstances, adjourning is a celebration. Like we had a good year, a good season, we met our individual targets, our team did well, etc. Why I bring up these stages is this impacts how you approach your leadership challenge. Because based on the stage, you will have a little bit more at play or a little bit less at play, depending on where you're at. Not all groups, and I know I'll go back to this slide. This, just for the purpose of showing them on a slide, they're not necessarily sequential. You most certainly do not spend equal amounts of time in each of these stages. And sometimes groups can get stuck. And really briefly, I would say that if you're in norming for an extended period of time, that's probably not good. And what you might need to do as a coach is to do something to make that group storm again so that you can get over the hump of norming. Because if you're stuck in norming, that's preventing you from performing. And I know we've got more individual sports online than team sports online, but don't think of this as team play. Think of this your group, your club traveling, your provincial group traveling, competing together. They all feed off of each other, whether you're at a swim meet or at a regatta. So think about your current challenge. And if this challenge is not athlete related, you can think about your group as a group of co-coaches, a group of administrators, etc. What sort of stage are they in? So thinking of your leadership challenge based on the brief description of how I define the stages, where do you think your group is at in answering your leadership challenge? So just a quick example, if we were in season right now, there would be a lot less on the line if you had to do something to address the group in the preseason, as opposed to it's 2 weeks before nationals or 2 weeks before provincials, etc. So I'll just restate some of the words around each stage to remember. Forming, there's anxiety, nervous, tentative, shy. When you're storming, frustrated, resentful, upset. Norming, confident and content. Performing, you're excited, you're enthusiastic. And when you're adjourning, anxious, sad, celebratory. So again, think of your leadership challenge and try to identify which stage your group is in right now or will be in at some point. If there are any questions, feel free to interject, raise your hand, give me a shout. The next component is the intervention. An intervention is any action that you take as a coach or a leader to facilitate change. Don't associate this with like bringing in that one friend or that one family member and sitting them on the couch and be like, hey, why are all my friends here? And like, this is an intervention. This is a different type of intervention than that example. There are 3 types of interventions, which is providing information. So if we were talking about a specific way to demonstrate a skill, for example, you would repeat and demonstrate. Also, if the group of athletes weren't getting it or the administrators weren't getting it, you would adapt. You would change the area. You'd change the equipment. You'd slow down the drill. Essentially, you're taking that big challenge and putting it into bite-sized pieces just so it doesn't seem like this big, massive undertaking to address. So how can we adapt the intervention to make it more feasible? And then facilitate group development. Ask questions to your athletes. Encourage them to challenge the approach. That's a great way to find a way through it. What you need to consider, just as much as what I said in the last component on the group, is what is at stake with your current leadership challenge? Is it a big thing? Is it something small, like just acquiring a offense to defense transition? How big is the group? Are we talking, how do I impact this leadership challenge with 30 athletes and 20 parents? Or is it with one coach? Or is it with one administrator? Or like how many people do you need to influence to have this change that you'd like to seek out? This could be anything like really small, like a technical one, which would be a small group, probably not as much at stake, to we need to do something big and drastic within our sport. Who's involved also matters, as well as your experience in this area, in this subject, in this approach. And then finally, can emotions run high with this change that you're hoping to make? Again, if it's technical, it's probably pretty small. If it's maybe, tactical in form of, we're changing the way our club operates, we're changing the way our sport operates, that has a big impact emotionally on a lot of people. When you are thinking about how to do this intervention, I would tell you to consider two approaches. So one way that we could do it would be to say, if it's a group dynamic thing, I'll do one-on-one conversations with each person involved. And then another approach that I can take is to address everybody as a group. You can increase your effectiveness by widening the range of possibilities for leadership action. Don't just do the one-time intervention and be done with it. After that intervention occurs with that athlete, with that parent, with that other coach, follow up. Check the impact, check the emotional state, check how much buy-in you now have to help move closer to addressing that leadership challenge. So again, for a minute, think about what type or how you need to intervene to address your leadership challenge. And the next two steps will roll into this really well. Help you navigate the choppy seas. Kirsty, do you know what a pirate's favorite letter is?
R.
You'd think it's R, but they really like the C.
Ha ha.
That was good. I liked it. Okay, are we ready? Anything but another poor joke from Evan. Listening. So Covey identified 5 levels of listening. Ignoring, just straight up not paying attention. Pretending to listen. Yep, sure. Listening selectively. So that's when, if someone said, a multitude of things, but you really were only listening for that one thing, you didn't get the whole message. Then attentive listening, and then finally listening with empathy. And at the Sports Center, we've done a number of exercises with our staff of levels of listening, and we've identified, or we've not identified, but it's been introduced to us as 3 levels: level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 2 is when you clearly understand. Level 3 is when you understand broadly. So not just what's being said, how it's being said, how it's impacting that person, how it's impacting other people. So listening, which is probably not surprising to anybody, is much more important than delivering the message yourself. So effectiveness in leading and coaching depends on the quality of the relationship you have with your athletes or others that support their goals. So relationships, in turn, are shaped by the quality of communication present in the relationship. Context influences our choice of action. We pay particular attention to the physical, physiological, psychological, and environmental factors that can affect communication. Jake, when you're coaching an athlete, what are some things that impact your ability or their ability to listen in practice?
In practice for us, it could be distance from the motorboat. It could be, conditions out on the water in terms of wind, rain, whatever may be going on with that. Is that the kind of factors you were after, or were you looking more for the in the gym type stuff?
Nope, that's whatever factors would have an impact on being able to hear coaching or being able to hear feedback from your athlete. So for your sport, exactly.
Yeah, environmental mainly.
Yep. Zoe, what about you in the pool?
We share the pool with swim lessons most of the time. So just the chaos of that, and what's going on sometimes creates a challenge of them hearing me, and then I guess me hearing them as well. And then both ways as well, whatever is going on kind of in their lives, sometimes it makes it harder for me to hear what they're actually trying to tell me or them be able to articulate it. So then that's like a barrier in listening as well.
Yep, absolutely. Those internal thoughts. Kirsty, do you have anything to add from inside a rink?
No, similar to a pool, I guess, it's just like the distraction. So like if there's another team warming up in the same rink, like outside of the rink, sometimes it can be hard to voice or hear voices from the other side of the arena or the ice surface. And yeah, and then during a game, of course, it's almost impossible to communicate from the bench to the ice.
Right. So ways around that would be finding select time, in practice at least, finding time to bring all the boats together when there's a water break, et cetera, to make sure that everybody understands. You can get feedback from them. So, I mean, if you're doing individual long distance stuff, then maybe not as easy because you start to see a big spread in training or different rest periods. But setting in, making sure that you take time during the warm up or before people get in the water on the ice or in the boat, that they clearly understand at least the purpose of the practice, because it's really important that everybody understands why they're doing what they're doing, instead of saying, look, we've got a rental time, we're only on the ice for 45 minutes, we don't have time to daddle, let's just get out there and get on the ice. You could have wasted an entire practice if athletes didn't clearly understand what the practice was all about or what the practice was for, or at the same time, you may miss out on some of the things that the athletes needed to tell you. So to lose 5 minutes of ice time or 5 minutes of pool time, or Jake, maybe 5 minutes of sun, it's worth it, because then at least you'll have a more purposeful practice. And Zoe, you brought up one that we don't think about a lot, is what's going on inside what are we thinking about? So especially at the high school level, where that like 15 to 19 plus, also minus, but generally in that like high school age, there's so many things that they're thinking about: school, friendships, courtships, stuff happening at home. There's so many other things going on in their mind, that whether it's a clear day and there's not a noise to be heard, they still might not be able to hear. You also need to consider that as a coach. What are some of the things that is in the back of your mind? What's preventing you from being able to hear and listen quite well? So some things to think about: hear the words that are being said to you, focus on what the message is that you're receiving. Then there's the trick of understanding and interpreting the message. Then you need to analyze and evaluate that message, and then respond to the message. So it's not just words, look, words back. Every time you say something, and especially if you're delivering that same message to your group, say 10 athletes, there could be 10 different interpretations. So we'll get to delivering a clear message in a second, but just think about when you are listening, all the things that can impact. I think about an example. This is recorded, isn't it, Kirsty? So I won't use names. A relative of mine, you know, the yeah-ands. So let's say I'm telling a story about this really great book that I just read. And I'll be saying, like, this person wrote it, it's on this topic, and I'm trying to explain, like, the synopsis to it. And I can just tell by looking at the person, they're just thinking, like, oh, I can't wait to tell my story about a book like that. And they're not even listening to what you're saying or anything about who wrote it or what the actual reason was that I was telling the story. Just like, yeah, well, I did that too. Or, let's say we're talking about my trip to Parsboro. And I said, like, all the cool things in Parsboro. Like, yeah, I've been to Parsboro, but have you ever been to Amherst? And you're like, that has nothing to do with my story. But there's lots of people out there. And if you are one of those people, you just need to be aware of it. It's again, a skill that you develop as you can practice it. So going back to that leadership challenge, think about two things. Who do you need to have a conversation with to address this leadership challenge that you identified a few minutes ago? And what is something that you need to focus on in listening that you may be at fault of? It could be the example that I just provided. It could be that you need to let go of the assumption of where it's like it needs to be this answer or nothing else. Maybe you need to be a little more open to listening to what the other people are saying. Just a minute or so to write down who you need to have a conversation with and what are some things that you need to focus on to make sure that you can hear the people that you identified that you need to have that conversation with. Okay. Next, delivering a clear message. This is so important. I have seen some great ideas, some great thoughts, some great plans get nowhere because the message was not clearly articulated. Need to be very clear and very focused on what it is that you're trying to do. You need to be able to speak for yourself in these leadership situations, and applying the skill of speaking for yourself in the context of providing instruction or demonstration. So just as important it is to try to make big changes to clubs or to your club. Let's say you say, we need to get an extra 4 hours of ice time and it's going to cost this much, but here's why we need to do it. That's as important as I need to make sure that the athletes understand this specific technical component. This is why. Clear messages have 4 parts. I see, I think, I feel, and I need. So what you see are facts. What you think and feel are often misunderstood, or they're not as interchangeable as we may think they are. And then you also need to say what you need. So it's not just delivering a message to say, stating the obvious. It's why do you need people to hear what you have to say? I need you to understand because of this. So go back again to that leadership challenge. What are the things that you need to say and to who? What is that key topic? What is the subtopic, possibly? And once you've identified who you need to have that conversation with, or whom you need to have that conversation with, and what those key topics are, there's other things that I want you to consider. What tone do you need to take? Is it a confident tone? Is it an exploratory tone? Is it an authoritative tone? How you say the words is as important as the words that you say. Other things to think about: what does the environment need to be? So we just talked about earlier of how listening and hearing and understanding are impacted by our environment. So you need to think about where these conversations need to take place. Maybe about a technical component that you would assume should be done in the pool, in the rink, on the field, on the pitch, actually isn't the place to have that conversation because of different environmental factors or time of day. Another thing to think about, if this is let's say outside of being on the deck, where do you need to be situated? Do you need to be in the center? Do you want to be face to face, side to side? Is everybody sitting and you're standing? This is actually quite important, and it's very much connected to the tone of what does that environment look like when you're delivering this message. And again, what do you see? What do you think? What do you feel? And what do you need? Cool. So now what? Great question. With my red background, maybe salmon, possibly pink. So hopefully going through this incredibly, this is a very complex approach and a very complex understanding that I tried to squeeze into an hour, and I've got about 8 minutes left to do so. What I'm hoping is that you have a few more tools and a template that can help you address that specific leadership challenge. Will it get you the result that you want? Hopefully. But if not, just like how you would drop a scheme for opponents or for a race plan or for a race warm-up, go back to it and see what adjustments you need to make to be successful next time. Again, this is going to take practice. This is going to take practice. This is going to take practice. But it's not just now what. So think of if you did or did not if you addressed the leadership challenge that you were looking at and it was not met, then think of does it have to be a different who? Maybe I identified the wrong person that I need to talk to. Do I need to reframe the what? Maybe what I thought the challenge was actually didn't lead to the outcome that I expected. That's where you can say, yes, I was successful. However, it still didn't produce. Maybe you need to look at that clear articulation of why. Why do we need to have this conversation? Why does this change need to occur? Or maybe the timing was off. Maybe you need to have a different when. Maybe it's not during a pandemic. Maybe, probably, I don't know. I don't think we can look back on the last time that there was a pandemic to address this to see what happened. But in let's say in normal times, maybe it really wasn't after practice. Or maybe it really wasn't after the season. This should have been something that I addressed preseason, or something that I should have addressed not in competition, not in a team meeting, etc. Or maybe it's a location. Maybe you need to look at a different place of where to have that conversation to address that leadership challenge. Or maybe it's a different intervention. Maybe the approach on how to address that leadership challenge is what you need to do. Either way, you'll be a lot closer because you had written down a game plan. And that's a little bit of what we're trying to look at today, is very quickly, what's your challenge? And in about 45 minutes, going through these 4 steps, how can we set a game plan of who we need to talk to, what we're talking about, why it's important to us, and how it's going to make a difference. And on that note, I will leave it to any questions, comments, or thoughts.
All right,
Or
any questions?
You said this was going to be available online, Evan. It's going to be on the YouTube.
It is in cyberspace, I believe. Kirsty, is that correct?
Yes, so we post all of our coach socialization sessions on our YouTube page. So it's the, I can put the exact link in the chat box, but it should be under Canadian Sports Center Atlantic. I think it's called coaching page or community coaching.
Okay, cool.
So we
Yeah.
have all of those, and we actually have past webinars on there as well. So
Perfect. Yeah, I'll take a scroll through there tomorrow when I'm putting together a little package for our coaches.
yeah, that'd be awesome.
And if anybody wants to, can you guys see this?
Yep.
If anybody wants to follow up with me directly, there is my email. It's evan@cscatlantic.ca.
All right. Well, thank you, Evan, and thank you to everyone for coming tonight and for watching our YouTube channel. As mentioned, this will be posted on YouTube later, as well as all of our other sessions. And our next session is tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., where Josh will be leading us through a presentation about how to analyze our athletes' performance using technology. So that's something that's definitely interesting and relevant to this generation. So feel free to tune in at 11 a.m. using the same Zoom link. But if you guys have any more questions, please feel free to stick around. And as Evan mentioned, you can reach out to him at his email address, or you can reach out to me at comcoach@cscatlantic.ca. So thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.